Martin Buber was a philosopher in the 20th century, and he basically said the Hebrew word for life is chaim. Now, the word chaim for life in Hebrew is a plural word. In other words, life does not exist in the singular. Nothing I've done in my life, I've done by myself. Everything has been done through encounters with other people, through dialogue, and through doing it together, right? Even Albert Einstein, and even he said that nothing I've ever done I've done alone. I've always done it by the intellect of other people, something like that. So if even he has to admit that, then I think you and I are well served to use the resource that lies in other people, and that in that encounter we create life.
Welcome to the Mindform podcast, where we delve into the minds of some of the most interesting people on the planet, discuss psychology, philosophy, and personal growth, and share the wisdom we uncover with you. Join us as we explore the art of forming our minds. Here's your host, Frank Lawton.
Kia ora from New Zealand. Welcome to another episode of the Mindform podcast. An extension of the Mindform collective and training platform, this podcast is similarly a space dedicated to exploring and altering psychological landscapes together. So in each weekly episode, I'll speak with a new guest, generally members of Mindform, to extract wisdom, refine ideas, and collaborate on the game of architecting our minds. This week's guest is Thomas D. Zweifel. Thomas lives with his wife and two daughters in Zurich. He's a leadership, business, coaching, and strategy expert with an impressive history of accomplishments. He co-founded Swiss Consulting Group, which he subsequently sold, and now works independently consulting business leaders, including those of Fortune 500 companies. He ran the New York Marathon in under 3 hours, and he's an award-winning author of several books, such as Communicate or Die, Leadership in 100 Days, The Rabbi and the CEO, and quite a few others. So I'm really looking forward to extracting some wisdom from this diverse experience today. I'll just start with how are you? I like to say, what are your sort of top 3 emotions this past day for you, Thomas?
Let's see. I think a top emotion is actually, I feel kind of nervous underneath. Partly because of the geopolitical situation right now, with the trade wars, with a very unpredictable American president, possible wars between China and the US, confrontations in Ukraine and Russia, and then obviously in the Middle East, where still 59 hostages are held by Hamas. So there's a lot of uncertainty right now, a lot of volatility, a lot of things that could go out of control. And also, when we look at artificial intelligence, it could be that major states will, such as China or the US or Iran, other actors might use AI to as a tool of warfare, to dominate. And I'm very afraid that democracy is under attack, that the free system where you and I can choose how we want to live, we have a choice to build our architecture of our own minds and our lives, right? To design our lives from the source, from cause, and not be the slaves of somebody. And if that's under attack, that makes me very, very nervous. So that's number one. Number two is I'm an optimist. So I think we're going to find a way. The human spirit will prevail. We will always find a way to be free and to do the things we need to do to make the world a better place. And what's number 3? I just love my life. I think I'm very grateful for the life I get to lead, that I get to do these conversations with you, that I get to write the books that I get to write, that I get to basically live the life that I want to live. I'm very fortunate that I don't have to make money anymore. I'm basically okay. My family's okay, and I can do the things that I love. So love is probably the third one.
Sounds intense, and I can definitely relate to this strange dichotomy between a sense of impending doom and terror and nervousness, combined with just awe at the indomitable human spirit. It is this peculiar tension that we can hold, isn't it, between extreme optimism and gratefulness and extreme, I guess, maybe even horror could be the word. So I guess that's just part of being an adult in the world, and especially I think when you have kids as well, that feeling really elevates because the whole world situation carries a bit more weight, doesn't it?
Yes, exactly.
Yeah, that's what I found shifted after I had my son. Well, anyway, it's very good to have you here, Thomas. This is one thing to be grateful for, and there's a lot of things to, I guess, feel hopeful about in the work that you've done and the conversation we can have. A lot of your work is, of course, on leadership, and that's definitely a topic I want to get into. And it's certainly relevant in the case of how can I take control of my destiny? How can I have an impact on how the course of things unfold? So I just want to ask two questions to sort of frame this conversation, to underlie it, which is what to you is leadership and what to you is a leader? And then we can build a bit more on the specifics.
Yeah, great question. Number one, I just want to say, as contextually, I believe, and maybe this is what the French call déformation professionnelle, which means my professional distortion, right? But I believe that leadership is the key ingredient for making the world a better place. If we look at the major issues facing us today, not only the ones that I said earlier, but also if you look at climate change, or if you look at sex trafficking, or human slavery, or smuggling, or drugs, or whatever you want to use as the major issues, it's all about leadership, in my view, to deal with those issues, because those issues are transnational. They usually go beyond the boundaries. So we need people around the world that are actually rising to leadership. And fortunately, you and I, all of us, all human beings, in my view, have the capacity to lead. It's no longer the select few. It's no longer just the Winston Churchills or the Nelson Mandelas or the special elites that can lead. Everybody can lead, and I will get into how you can do that, how we can do that in our lives.
Love that idea.
What is leadership? In my view, leaders are people that have conversations of value that empower others to achieve their goals. Maybe I should say that again.
Awesome.
So,
yeah, totally.
Leaders are people that have conversations of value that empower others to achieve their goals. So, in other words, I'm talking about co-leadership. I'm talking about leadership not from the top down. Now, you could lead from the top down. People do that, right? Sometimes I'm just reading the biography of Elon Musk, and I would say that a lot of his leadership is very top down. He's very dominant, very command and control. And you can achieve results with that. You can even achieve breakthrough results, but you will not end up with leaders around you. And for me, the definition of leadership has to entail that you lead leaders, that you basically empower people to be leaders around you. And that's what I call co-leadership.
Yeah, I love that.
You could basically say there have been many leadership theories, and I think we don't want to get into a major theoretical discussion, but one leadership theory has been trait, that leadership is something inborn, that either you're born a leader or you're just not, and then it's bad luck for you, right? So either you're born like a Pablo Picasso or like a Winston Churchill, or you're not. And that leadership is basically a question of genetics. If I'm white, if I'm tall, if I have a certain intelligence. Some people say charisma is a kind of an inborn quality, right? So one could make a case for that theory, right? That there are certain leadership traits that you need to have, or you cannot lead. As you can tell, I don't believe in that theory. Second would be trait theory, where you say leadership is a certain set of behaviors, or I'm sorry, did I say trait? That was a mistake. I mean style. So that leadership is a certain set of styles. How do you walk down the aisle? How do you project your voice? A certain gravitas. in your behavior. If you act like a leader, you will be a leader. That may have certain truth, but it's way too much on the surface for me. And then you have psychometric theory, which is basically, that comes from Sigmund Freud, that in the early years of your life, you're predisposed to be a leader or not, right? That your early childhood experiences will predestine you in a way, predispose you toward leadership or not. And again, one could espouse that, or one could see certain value in that. I don't think so. I think that's only part of the picture. And then you have transformational theory, which is basically, how do you treat your followers? Do you have individualized attention and charisma and things like that? My theory, if I could be so bold as to say I have a theory.
Do it.
My theory is that leadership is a set of conversations. And I said this earlier, that leaders are people that have conversations of value. So,
yes.
So I found that by virtue of how you speak and listen, by virtue of the conversations you have, I can have a conversation with you that will inspire you. That's a conversation of vision. And that vision will inspire you. And then I'm leading, right? So there are certain conversations that will produce leadership, that allow you to lead somebody else. And while I'm not saying this is the truth, I say that it's immensely empowering, because anybody who's a human being, maybe with the exception of Helen Keller, who could not speak, but even she could lead, because conversations are not only the verbal conversations, right? I could converse without language. I can converse with my body language. I can converse with my face. I can converse with the tone of my voice. So the conversations I have are conversations of leadership. And that's what that's my theory, is that anybody can lead by virtue of having certain conversations of value that empower other people to get the job done.
Well, what I thought and felt as you were saying that was that sort of empowerment that you speak of is like, oh, well, that's attainable. You know what I mean? That's very accessible. I think those ideas of leadership is something that once you're an adult, you find you're able to do it or you're not, or maybe that it's some kind of acting game, can definitely put you in the position where it's terrifying, I guess, to take up, oh, maybe can I try to make something happen in this space? But it's also so believable. So a mentor of mine, someone who's, I guess, led me in a lot of ways in my life, that's entirely how it's happened. It's not his charm or charisma or anything like that. It's that he has listened to me and spoken to me, but had like real personal, honest conversations with me in a way that has brought out what I'm capable of and empowered me to step out and do things. And that's had a bigger impact on me than anything else, really.
That is beautiful. And, that brings up another principle. And we get this from Martin Buber. Martin Buber was a philosopher in the 20th century. And he basically said the Hebrew word for life is chaim, okay? And we say l'chaim, for example, when we toast each other, when we drink something, right?
Yeah.
To life. And now the word chaim for life in Hebrew is a plural word. In other words, life does not exist in the singular. Nothing I've done in my life, I've done by myself. Everything has been done through encounters with other people, through dialogue, and through doing it together, right? I would say that what made you a leader in that conversation with your colleague is basically, or with your mentor, that's basically an encounter. It's the dialogue, it's the together speaking that actually creates life, and that creates the future. And I can do a lot of thinking by myself, but unless I'm in a conversation, nothing is going to happen. There's no action.
Yeah, absolutely. I wonder if I'm sure a lot of people would say, and perhaps it's true that it's sort of a modern or a Western thing, but there is this intuition, or this, maybe intuition is not the right word, but there's this sense that people have about remarkable people who get things done. That all of that happened, all of what happened around that person was because they were remarkable and they made everything happen and they had all the good ideas and they just like were so amazing that they like told people what to do on their behalf and they did them, or they spoke so well everyone just was moved, like, and I love actually reading like about these people, like reading their biographies, learning about the context, and there is no impressive amazing leader in history that I've yet encountered looking into who didn't have an incredible person that they were connected to, who brought that out in
Hmm.
them, and who didn't network with so many other impressive people to be able to even be able to do so much of what they did. So that speaks, it's very true to me.
Yeah, absolutely. And I believe I'm remembering as you speak that even Albert Einstein, who's one of the most ingenious people that ever lived, right? The quintessential scientist. And even he said that nothing I've ever done, I've done alone. I've always done it by virtue of the intellect of other people, something like that. So
Mm.
if even he has to admit that, then I think you and I are well served to use the resource that lies in other people, right? And
Yeah,
that
I mean
in that
that's
encounter we create life. Yeah.
yeah. I think I've brought this point up on more than one episodes of this podcast already, but I read an interesting book, Rutger Bregman, Humankind, which is like it's basically arguing for the statement that humans are basically cooperative. But one of the things
Mhm.
that are interesting theories that he references in his book is that what makes humans unique as opposed to like other great apes is not exclusively our capacity to come up with novel, intelligent ideas, but it's how rapidly those ideas move through the population. One person
Mm.
has to invent something and everyone just copies them. And so, the one in a million idea is everyone's idea every time. And so it's just,
Yeah.
you know, and that's how we get stuff done, by sharing what we come up with rather than by being so good at coming up with stuff.
Yeah. I
Um,
agree. And Yuval Noah Harari, who wrote this book, *Sapiens*, right?
Great book,
He
of
he came
course.
to the same conclusion uh, that basically what distinguishes us from other species is that we were able to collaborate on a large scale. So it's kind of a similar idea, right? That usually the limit I think was about 15 to 20 people that would collaborate among primates, for example. But
Mm.
we were able to do it with tens of thousands of people by building infrastructures and states and collectives and communities. And that's how we get stuff done. And that's how we were able to survive as a species, because from a physical viewpoint, we're not that strong. We cannot even tackle a lion or a tiger, right? So we had to deal with other ways. We had to collaborate very intelligently.
Yes,
So
on
that's
that
where
on
language comes in, right? So and that's why my theory is leadership through language, basically, because language is in my view, the key thing that creates reality.
Mm. Yeah, absolutely. What you've just brought to mind is that I think now on the bending down of its curve, but that huge popular culture thing, or 100 men versus one gorilla, like that's the question, right? Because is our intelligence anyway? That's a whole other conversation, but there's just that I brought that to
Right.
mind. Um, just I want to go deep on that. I mean, we've been talking about this kind of high idea. What is leadership? What are human beings? Okay, so your theory, leadership is how we have conversations. It's a leader is somebody who is has these conversations of value and is able to empower other people in that way. So all of us are always having conversations. Human beings. That's what we do. What
Hmm.
what are the things that transform regular conversations into, like, where does leadership come in? What makes it a
Hmm.
leadership conversation? What makes it an empowering conversation? How does one shift? Yeah, you know what I'm getting at.
Yeah. Well, maybe I should talk about this tool that I have developed over many years, which is called the Global Leader Pyramid. Because you could basically, you're absolutely right. I mean, you could have, it's not just any old conversations, right?
Yeah.
In fact, the conversations that we inherited, or that we kind of have in a thoughtless way every day, right? It's kind of small talk. How's the weather? How are you doing? You know, those are not conversations of leaders. And when I say
Exactly.
conversations of value, I mean very, very specific conversations.
That's what I. Yeah.
And so, I don't know if you could maybe show the Global Leader Pyramid when you do the podcast later.
Yeah,
I'm not sure if that's
course, yeah.
possible, but
Definitely.
so basically, it starts with the bottom level, which I call self-awareness. So basically, at the bottom level, you check your own values. You have a conversation with yourself, actually, to start with, and say, yeah, how am I feeling? Like the question that you asked me in the beginning. What are the 3 top feelings today that you have, right? That's a great question, because it gets me to be self-aware. How am I feeling? How am I doing? You know, what's going on? But also, what are my core values? What's the context I'm in? What's the culture I'm in? Those are all conversations of self-awareness. I could also ask somebody for feedback. That's also a way to create self-awareness. Or I could go off and meditate somewhere. I have a friend or a former client who actually took his BMW on the Autobahn in Germany every night, right? So that's how he got his self-awareness. I'm not telling people how to do it, right? So that's the bottom level, okay? Self-awareness. Second level, relationship. I'm now having a conversation with you, and I would ask you, for example, who are you? You know, what are your values, for example? Where do you come from? How can we build trust with each other? How can we see if we have shared interests? That's a conversation for relationship. Then I go to vision. Where do you want to be in 5 years, for example? What are your life goals? Those are conversations for vision, right? What could we accomplish together? What is something that you're dreaming of that you think is impossible? How could we, or what could we dream up together, right? What do you want? At the most simple level, what do you want, or what do we want if we're a company? Where do we want to be in 5 years? What's our vision? Then it goes to strategy, which is how are we going to get there? What's the budget? What could go wrong? What is it going to cost? What are the milestones? What are the goals? What are the accountabilities? What could derail the whole thing? What are the obstacles? What are the opportunities? What's missing? Those are all conversations for strategy. You know, SWOT, for example, strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, threats. All these questions are strategic conversations. And then finally, at the top level is action. But action is also a conversation, right? So if I want to get you to do something, I'm going to make a request. If I want to get myself to do something, I'm going to make a promise. I can also have other conversations. I could invite you to do something. You know, I invite you to read a book of mine, or I invite you to the movies, or I invite you to get married to me. Not you personally, because I'm already married. So,
Thanks.
Or I can make a commitment, right? And there are other conversations for actions. Like I could issue a threat. You know, that's how certain political leaders do it. You know, if you don't do this, I'm gonna bomb you, or I'm gonna increase the tariffs or whatever. So you can deal with threats. That's also a conversation for action. I don't particularly find it productive most of the time, because again, the other person doesn't become a leader through that. They're just my slave. Right. They're just my object in my strategy. But those are the 5 levels. Okay, so basically self-awareness, relationship, vision, strategy, and action. Yeah, that's the one.
Doodling. Yeah.
Exactly. In fact, I have one also here.
Oh, boom.
Looks like
yeah,
this.
Hold that for a couple of seconds. Love it. Oh, nice. And you've got why, who, what, how, when. That works too. I have a
Yeah,
question
those are the
about it.
simplest questions, right? Why,
Yeah.
why am I feeling this way? Why am I getting impatient? Why am I getting angry at this person, right? That's self-awareness. And then who are you? Who am I? Who are we together? What are our core values, right? And then vision, what do I want? What do you want? What do we want? And then strategy is how are we going to get there? And action is when. When can you do this for me? Or when should I, by when will I achieve $1 million in sales or whatever? Okay.
Mm. It's easy to appreciate the significance of each component. Could you go a bit more into why in that shape? So why is self-awareness the foundation, the largest section? Why is action at the top? What's the importance of the ordering of these things?
Yeah, excellent question. When I started, I said this took me several years because when I started, I thought relationship was the bottom level, right? I felt like
Right.
I was living all over the world. I was consulting on 4 different continents. I almost died in India. I lived in Japan. I lived in the US. I lived in the UK. I lived in Germany. And I found that my culture as a Swiss person is not the only culture in the world, right? Surprise. Oh, wow. People are living totally different in India and they still have a valid way of getting stuff done, right? So it's not that the Swiss have the best way or the only way, even though sometimes I do think that the Swiss have the best way, but that's a different story. Uh, uh, they're all different cultures. So I suddenly discovered when I set out, I said, okay, relationship is very undervalued in the West. When I worked with people in Latin America or in South Asia or in Arab countries, for example, uh, in East Asia also, uh, I found that relationship was much more valued and much more practiced before people went into the business at hand, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Americans at the extreme would sometimes go directly from vision to action. It was like, I got this dream, Martin Luther King, I have a dream. And then you immediately go into action and you don't consider the relationship that needs to be built to actually have a shared set of values and shared interests before you go into the vision. Uh, and then the Europeans taught me to also have strategy, that you actually need to know the how, you need to mitigate the risks before you launch into action sometimes. So I went from relationship to vision to strategy to action. I think that makes sense. But then I suddenly discovered that there was right after 9/11, there was the scandal around Enron and around all kinds of companies like Accenture. There were all these Shears and Lehman or whatever they were called, Lehman Brothers, that went belly up, right? And I was like, why could that happen? And there I had my question, why, right? So I suddenly discovered that people who do not have self-awareness will basically lead in the wrong direction.
Right.
I mean, the extreme example of that is Adolf Hitler, right? I would say that Adolf Hitler was absolutely unclear about his core values. Why did he hate people so much? Why did he feel so victimized by Versailles, by the First World War, by the victory powers? And why did he hate the Jews so much, for example? So I discovered that self-awareness is absolutely essential. That if you don't have a moral compass, you're going to lead. You might be very effective as a leader, but you will lead in the wrong direction and you will lead into peril and produce massive bad outcomes for people around you and for the world. So then I put in that bottom floor of self-awareness. And that's how the pyramid came to be.
Love it. It reminds me of a conversation I had on this podcast with Ryan, the Mindform founder, and another member of Mindform about called Mufakral, about ethics, about morality, and the conversation was really it was really came down to, where does the development of moral greatness or moral horror, I guess, moral failing, how does that come to be? And the two things that we leaned on, I guess, in the end, were relationship and self-awareness. We sort of came to our agreement point about it was that, and we brought up Hitler in the exact same way, I suppose, is that, you can have moral principles and a lot, but if there isn't that internal, not just a moral compass, but it's just like a compass to navigate yourself, right? If there isn't that internal capacity to, why do I feel this way? Why do I want this? What is it that I actually value, and how does one actually achieve that? People who fail to ask those questions, they can be great according to every other metric, but just be going and do all of that and utilize all of that power in such a deadly direction. But relationship was the other end of it as well, which in the context of that conversation was empathy, right? It's actually just appreciating, understanding, and being cooperative with other people. You learn that not just as a rule book in the context of ethics, you learn that as genuine relating and genuine aligning yourself with others' purpose and needs, and considering how other people value and experience and feel. And through those two things coming together, that's how you act in a way that is positive, that is beneficial. And that's how you become an individual as well, who can orient themselves, I suppose, rightly in the world. Interesting intersection there.
Exactly. And, even people that are successful, when I think of successful leaders, like you could take Steve Jobs, or you could take Elon Musk or Donald Trump or whatever. I actually wrote a letter to Donald Trump after he was elected the first time in 2016, because I'm not the kind of guy who likes to complain about people when they're not there. So I thought I would complain to him directly. But I didn't just complain, obviously. I basically told him that the very success that you have, and he's been extremely successful on many different fronts, right? The very success can blind you to who you are, because you then think that because you're successful, you should continue the way you have, right? Which can be extremely dangerous, right? So the question is for me always, because this is a lifelong exploration that we're talking about here, right? This is not something you can check off in 5 minutes and say, okay, checked off my values, checked off my ethics, who am I as a set of values? Exactly, check it off. No, this is an inquiry that happens over time, over many years. You keep peeling the onion, right? And the question for me is always, do you need a crisis in your life to start exploring? God forbid, we may have crises like the death of a loved one. My sister died when I was 21, when she was 18. That certainly was a wake-up call for me, clearly. But do you need those kinds of wake-up calls from the outside? God forbid you may have a very bad illness, or you may have a divorce or a death in the family that force you to wake up and to explore. My question is, could we explore by volition, right? Could we explore because it's what leadership is? I think it was Socrates who said, "The unexamined life is not worth living." I totally believe that. What is my life if I'm just an automat, if I'm just a machine? Then I could replace myself with artificial intelligence, and they probably will do a better job than me. But the uniqueness of the human being is the exploration. It's to never be satisfied with an answer, and to always question. How could I do better, or what today did I do well, and what did I not do well? It doesn't have to be very esoterical. It could be very concrete. How could I be a better father? How can I make sure that my daughters grow up with the right values, right? What is the right values anyway? Do I know? Maybe they have a better idea what the right values are. Those are all questions. That's why I said in the beginning, my last name is Zweifel, which means doubt in English, right? So And
Fantastic.
the quote by Descartes, by the way, he didn't just say cogito ergo sum, which means I think therefore I am. He actually said dubito cogito ergo sum. Dubito ergo cogito ergo sum, which means I doubt, therefore I think, therefore I am. So the doubt is the critical thing. I'm making an advertising for my own name here, but doubting is what will create innovation. That's what Richard Feynman said also, who's the physicist who got the Nobel
Yes,
Prize in
love him.
1964, right?
Yeah, I'm reading about
I
him now.
love his way of being, and his way of being is totally the inquiry and the exploration, and to be like a child, to never think I know already, which I think is the biggest enemy of innovation.
Yeah, I think we were talking earlier about what makes humans humans, and we were talking about that in the context of not apes, right? But in the context as well of not machines, not AI, and that's obviously more relevant than ever now with AI. There's that what the term that keeps coming to mind as you're speaking, and as I look at this pyramid I've doodled here, is it's like intentionality, right? And that and doubting as well. It comes to that. There's that. I mean, like at every level here, right? Like if you're acting without strategy, you're just, again, it's automaton, right? It's blind, it's ticking boxes. If you are planning and strategizing without a real vision, it's blind. You're an automaton. If you create a vision without being connected with other people, or with, what do you do? There's no grounding in some higher, deeper, more personal. I think it's something about the personal, is our more personal reality. And then if you do any of that without self-awareness, again, you're just playing a game. You're just playing it out. So it's that capacity, what it means to be, in a way, more than just thinking, more than just an animal, to be a human. And as you've said, all human beings have the capacity to be leaders. So maybe what it means to be a leader similarly is it's that capacity to look at decisions, look at actions, look at who you are, look at what you're doing, and ask, okay, what's behind that? And be intentional. Be intentional. You're not just, and I guess in a way that's one way of defining leadership, right? Because if you're not intentional, you're following. If you're intentional, you're making the decision, and you know why you're making the decision.
Yes, absolutely right. I would have, instead of intentionality, I would have called it self-determination. But I think it's the same thing. For me, leadership begins with self-determination. And General Pershing in the First World War said, no man, and I'm sure he would have included women as well, if he lived today, no man is fit to command another that is not fit to command himself, right? So if you don't have a command of yourself, then you're a slave of other people. And that is also very dangerous. Let's look at fascism. How could somebody like Eichmann exist, right? Eichmann was basically, now I didn't know him personally, so maybe I'm doing him injustice, but he strikes me as somebody who did not think for himself, right? It's like the absence of evaluating what the commands are and seeing, do I want to do this or not? And
well, that was his defense. I didn't think for myself, is one other way to word his defense.
I did not think of myself. I was just a machine, right? I was just an automaton that was basically carrying out orders blindly. And I think that's extremely dangerous. And by the way, that didn't just happen in Nazi Germany or under fascism, or under also under communism in the Soviet Union, but or in China under Mao. But it also happened in tests, right? There were tests being done where people had to inflict pain on other people. Maybe you heard about this experiment.
Yeah, I do know about it.
By I forgot his name, Milner or something like that. I forgot the name. Michel, I think his name was Michel. Anyway, he did this experiment where people were directed by other people in white coats, right? So lab coats, to inflict pain on somebody they didn't see, right? They had to turn the dial, and the person in the white coat said, just do it, because I'm telling you, I'm the person in authority. You just do what I say. And they literally turned the dial. And if the people in the other room would not have been actors that were faking it, they would have actually died. So some people carried out the order to the death. And this happened in several experiments. And this frightens me tremendously, right? If people don't think for themselves, they will be slaves and they can be used for any purposes as useful idiots, so to speak.
I would love to remark. I know, and I share your sentiment. But every time I hear that story, I have to remark. I mentioned earlier, the book Humankind, and so he goes into, and I study this stuff in my psych degree as well. He goes into these experiments and the records of them and the history of them, and it's there was a wave at the time of, I guess it was sort of, I can't think of the word right now, but it was getting a lot of attention because it was horrifying. You know, people were drawing into it, of these experiments which showed the worst of human nature, and that's certainly one of them. But what is often not told in the data, which is as equally true a part of the story, is that a lot of individuals would be extremely defiant and refused and would fight. And in this prison experiment, of Stanford prison experiment is another famous experiment under that sort of umbrella. The authorities and the fake authorities had to do a lot of the, no, I'm in charge and you'll get in trouble in some way and all these things will go wrong, and threats and appeals to authority and a number of things in order to really get people to act how they want to act. So I guess that's just to say, you know, we all do have a capacity for that self-determination, and it's within us, and it's often those individuals who have that top-down, that control thing that can lead us astray, in my mind, as much as as much as a lack of self-awareness, or as much as anything, is that individuals who come into leadership without self-awareness, without ethics as well, can totally override, but with effort and through force and through pressure and threat, can override other people's desire to be intentional, to be thoughtful, to think about what my values are before I act.
Yes, I agree with that. And at the same time, it makes me hopeful about humanity that there are all those people that were defiant. And I believe that any human being at any moment in time can check their own integrity. And your integrity is something that nobody can take away from you, right? People can cut off your arm, they can torture you, they can do all kinds of things to you. But your integrity, which basically means I'm living consistent with my principles, that nobody can take away from you, right? I'm walking my talk. That's something that they cannot torture out of you. They cannot remove that. That is either there or it's not, and that's your choice. You have a choice at any moment in time to live a life of integrity, which means to live consistent with your statements or with your principles, right?
Yeah, on Mindform we talk about, the good life and flourishing and eudaimonia and all of that, and something that is a principle that sort of brings us together in that context, that's in Ryan's latest book as well, is which is called Become Who You Are, is that is the surest, that is the directest, that is the best path to eudaimonia. That's internal well-being, but it's also like the peaks of character is knowing what your values are and then doing them. Like it's maybe easier said than done, but the formula itself is really, really straightforward, right? You get in touch with, what do I value most genuinely, most deeply, most highly, and then just be that and act that out. And that is something, it's not just an effective strategy because it makes for a damn good life, but it's an effective strategy for the same reason you said. You can cut your arm off, anything can happen to you, it doesn't matter. But that is sort of a let's not get into dementia, I guess, but in general, that's something that cannot be broken. That is a decision you can make in any context, wherever you are, no matter what's going on, no matter what pressures around you. You can always go, what's the decision I can make now that is most aligned with my values? And that can always bring you peace of mind.
There's a beautiful story about Mahatma Gandhi, where a mother comes to Mahatma Gandhi, and she goes with her son, with her 8-year-old son, and she has to travel by rickshaw, by train, by bus, and she finally gets to the ashram where Gandhi is living. And Gandhi comes out, and he says, "What do you want?" And the mother says, "Please tell my 8-year-old son here to stop eating sugar." And Gandhi says, okay, come back in 2 weeks. And the woman doesn't quite understand, but it's the great Mahatma Gandhi, so better not ask any questions. So she goes back to her village with the bus, train, and rickshaw. And then 2 weeks later, she comes again with the son, right? Rickshaw, train, and bus. And finally, she stands in front of Gandhi again. And Gandhi says, what do you want? And the mother says, now tell my son to stop eating sugar. And Gandhi bends down to the son and says, stop eating sugar. And then the woman loses it, okay? She goes like, Mahatma Gandhi, I know you're this great man, but why did you not tell him 2 weeks ago? You made me travel all the way back to my village. It was very, very logistically difficult. And he says, 2 weeks ago, I was eating sugar.
Oh, that's brilliant. That's
that for me is integrity.
that's so Gandhi.
That's
Have
so
you
Gandhi.
read?
And if
Yeah.
even Gandhi, if even Gandhi has to do that, then I think the rest of us know what we need to do, right? So
That's amazing.
where in your life do you not live consistent with who you want to be? And then close that gap, see if you can close it. You can also close it by saying, okay, I'm giving up on this principle. I'm just going to be down here. But hopefully you were going to take the actions up to the principle level, right? For me, it's always about closing that gap.
I want to get specific on that.
By the way, that's just to add one thing that I do not consider integrity as a moral distinction. I'm not talking about, we should all be good people and all that stuff. Yes, we should all be good people, but let's face it, we're not. Okay. For me, integrity is simply to honor my words. That's simply integrity. Okay, so I'm taking it again as a conversational thing because leadership is conversations, right? And self-awareness is conversations with myself. Integrity is honoring my word. So in other words, if I said that I would be there at 8:40 a.m. this morning and dial in at 8:40, I did at 8:40, right? And you did too. If I say, I'm not going to eat sugar, then I need to stop eating sugar. That's called honoring your word. But I could also say, you know what, I'm giving up on this word called I'm not eating sugar. I'll eat sugar. Okay. I'll forgive myself. Okay. So it's better to say no with integrity than to pretend something and then not live up to that. Okay. So basically walking your talk is the critical distinction, honoring your word. And you can honor your word by revoking your word. So if I say, I'll get the book done by the end of May, and then I discover that I can't do it, then I simply need to clean it up by informing people that will be affected. That basically, I'm revoking my promise and I'm making a new promise. And I would assert that this kind of integrity is probably the key raw material of performance. It's more important than money.
Wow.
It's more important than time. It's more important than relationship. I need those things also, right? I need the factors of production, capital, land, and labor, I guess.
Yeah, sure.
To get something done, right? So those are the capital. Those are the forms of the means of production. But I would assert that integrity is not a moral distinction, but it's also a means of production. If you lead a life of integrity, and I mean also in your body and in your relationships, am I living up to what I want to do? If I said I would go to the gym, am I going to the gym? Or am I going to revoke that promise and say, no, I'm not going to the gym. I have no commitment to go to the gym. Fine. Then that's also integrity. And I assert that integrity is the key to performance. So I take it out of the ethical and moral distinctions. And I'm sure there is an integrity, there is something about the ethics and all that, but that doesn't interest me. I'm interested in performance, and I'm interested in living a life that you designed and having your actions match your words.
I feel that feels very, very true to me, and I feel quite moved as well. I want to know why, I guess, a bit of your story of how you came to that conclusion, because there's a whole world of people. I mean, this is to do with your
Mhm.
work, of course, right? People who lead themselves and who lead others on performance, on self-determination, accomplishing whatever, and doing that as a team, doing that as an individual. And by the way, just I love the lack of boundarying, the lack of distinction between conversation with self and conversation with other, integrity with yourself and integrity with other. I think that you know, in most worldviews throughout history, there hasn't been a hard boundary there. That's where we're social beings. But anyway, how did you come to see that as maybe you could say as the bottleneck, or as the defining factor, like sort of that integrity of keeping your word, of aligning what you believe and say with action? Why is that underlie performance above all else? What's the story there?
Before I answer that, I need to say one thing about conversations, and then I'll
For
go
it.
to the biographical. Okay. So you mentioned conversations can be with myself or with other people. Okay.
Yeah.
I would even go further and say that I would say that all of life is conversation. And
Okay.
let's take an example. If I take a company, I'll take Google as an example. It doesn't matter. I could take Tesla or whatever. Tesla is not first and foremost a company with cars. Okay. Now, obviously, when I say Tesla, you think of cars and all that. But Tesla is not only the people that work for Tesla. Tesla is not only the desk where these people work or the offices where these people work. That's all true, right? So there's a kind of a structural component of Tesla. But I would say that ultimately Tesla is a conversation. Tesla invokes certain things. When I say Tesla, you think of certain things. You think of Elon Musk. You think of electric cars. You think of batteries. You think of design. All kinds of things. And I would say that Elon Musk has, by creating Tesla with other people, he created a conversation called Tesla. Okay, so I would say that even a company is a network of conversations that is the sum of all the conversations that are being had. And I'm gonna. How old is your son?
2.5.
2.5. Okay, so if your son came into this interview, or if he saw you, if he came to the office and he saw you work, right, on a daily basis, he would probably say, "Daddy is having conversations." I mean, maybe he couldn't say that yet, but he would see you talking on the phone. He would see you talking to me. He would see you reading something. He would see you on the phone or in meetings or whatever. Mostly what Dad is doing is conversations. So basically, that's what I'm saying. Life is a set of conversations, right? So therefore, leadership is also conversations. So I just wanted to put that in as kind of a context of this entire conversation that we're having about leadership. Now I'm going to go into the biographical. Sorry for the deviation. This is very personal. So I mentioned that my sister died at 18, and she actually died of a heroin overdose. And she already went into hard drugs at I believe it was already at 14, because at 16 we had to pick her up in Greece, where she had her first overdose in Greece, in Athens. And then we were hoping for 2 years, and unfortunately it did not turn out. And we found her after 10 days, and basically partly eaten up by insects and all that. It's a really terrible story, which
I'm so
haunts me to
sorry.
this day. I mean, I probably
Yes.
will probably never quite get over this, because it's just, there's certain wounds in life that can never heal, that will never heal. And I remember
They don't.
standing
You
at
don't want
her.
them to. Those ones, in a way, you know.
Yeah, in a way, that's right, because it would almost be unfair to put that completely behind me. And it's part of who I am, in a way. And I remember standing at her grave. We were standing at the cemetery, and there were lots of people coming. I mean, it felt like half the town was there. People were so shocked that this could happen, right? And I stood at her grave and I said to myself, through the tears, I said, I now need to live life for the both of us. And this is completely illogical in a way. It's not healthy. However, it led me to lead the three lives that I'm leading, right? So people who read my biography go like, wow, that's a long biography. How old is this guy? So it made tremendous accomplishments possible. It allowed me to do things that I could not dream possible. Teaching at Columbia, building a company, selling the company, becoming financially free, building a wonderful family. There's so many things, writing 12 books, all this stuff, right? It's fantastic. I could not dream of a more beautiful life, in a way. And at the same time, it was also an overcompensation out of that vow that I made at her grave, right? It's like I need to live for the both of us in order to ensure that my parents will never feel like they failed, right? That was basically the idea. I wanted to show my parents that they didn't screw up completely. And that's the prison in which I lived life. And actually, I forgot what your question was, and I don't know if I'm answering it. Am I
That's all right.
answering it?
I'll rephrase it briefly. I think it doesn't
Okay.
entirely matter if you're exactly answering it, but the question is, how did you come to see that definition of integrity as foundational to leading a good life, to productivity, to leadership, to good conversation?
Okay, so I assert that my answer is absolutely relevant because
Great.
discovering that I'm in that prison, that I'm living in a context called I need to live for the both of us in order to compensate for my parents' failure, or for all of our failures, for the death of my sister, right? Discovering that was the game I was playing unconsciously led me to a deeper integrity, because in life, our job in life, I think, is to find out who we are and then to execute on that, right? What's my life purpose? There was a rabbi in the 18th century, his name was Rabbi Zusha, who said, in the world to come, I shall not be asked, why were you not Moses? Why were you not Abraham? I shall be asked, why were you not Zusha? Right? So my job as a human being is to find out, who am I? Why am I not Thomas? Okay. And then to be Thomas, and that's integrity. And it's to basically match my actions with my purpose. So I discovered that I was doing a life that was not truly by choice, but it was given by the death of my sister and the decision I made at that time. This is, as I said, this is intensely personal, maybe too personal for some people listening in here. But that, in my view, is the job that we all have to do, is to find out who we are, and hopefully, I said earlier, hopefully you don't need the death of a loved one, you don't need a life-threatening illness or an accident or some kind of a divorce or break in the relationship in order to wake up. I hope that we could do it by choice. I hope we could do it from the future rather than from the circumstances.
Yeah, I do really appreciate you sharing that story, and I think well, I have a quite a similar story. A few years ago, my best friend throughout high school and that took his own life, and it was a very similar I suppose it was in a way, it was quite a similar learning for me. I felt that what it revealed to me was a similar lesson to what you just described, which is that what was lost when he left, when he ceased to exist. I don't know, you go through life, you play all these games and you try to be this person and that person, and I realized that what was lost was none of that, but just him and what he loved and what he valued, and his very uniquely him way of celebrating life and of approaching problems and all of that. And I felt, oh dear, I just bumped my microphone there. I felt this deep shame, really, actually, for a long time at having seen him and myself not through that lens of what what it is to live and what it is to be alive is to be unfolding as an expression of the unique thing that I am, and that I felt this strong obligation to do that, right? It made me, in a way, sort of the opposite, right? But it really made me see that there's no opportunity for him to do that anymore, and so I need to do that. Like, I need to, in order to honor that he's unable to do that, in order to honor the regret that I have for not having seen him through that lens as well, I need to be enthusiastically, unashamedly, and with determination, whoever I uniquely am, whatever I uniquely believe, and not trying to play this game of trying to be or become somebody. And it's that stepping back, it's asking that question, but it's not just a contemplative sort of exercise. It's really it's what you say is, I doubt, therefore I think, therefore I am. It's what you are, what it means to be you, comes from there's this depth and this personalness and this emotional weight that you have to lean into to, and that's sort of the energy well through which life can drive out of. But if there's no access point to that, you're just playing games and the other people's games,
Wow,
and you're not
that's
really living.
beautifully
Yeah.
said. Beautifully said. And that's exactly the essence. And I hope that people take that to heart and apply it. Right. So ultimately, for me, it's all about action. You could have insights, you could have peak experiences, and life altering moments of insight, but if you don't turn it into action, it gets lost, right? It's just like a conversation is like breathing out in winter. You have winter in New Zealand sometimes, right? So
Every now and then.
every now and then, when you breathe out in the winter, it's that vapor that comes out of your mouth and then just dissipates. And that's how conversations are. So unless you make them into action and you do something with them and you keep them in existence, they will just disappear. Which can be good news, right? So, pain can disappear as well if pain is a conversation.
And failure, yeah.
Failure could disappear, or whatever. But also the good stuff. Your commitments can also disappear. Your accountability could disappear, and that's what you need to. You don't need to, but you have the opportunity to live like that, to make a promise. That's what Nietzsche said. What distinguishes us from animals is that we can promise, we can make plans, we can execute on a strategy, we can set goals, we can say how we want to live and then live that way. So unless you take it into action, nothing will happen.
Yeah, I want to ask you a little bit about the how of that, and maybe we can go into cockpit a little bit as well, like the
Okay.
work you've done on the specifics of that, because I think, I mean, this is just personal for me. Like, honestly, in a way, this is a personal question, not even the podcast, but like, I believe all of that, and a lot of people do, or a lot of people can hear that and be moved by that and believe that, but that execution and follow through is not just a question of how in touch am I with my values? I think
Mm-hmm.
a lot of people, there's the failure in the follow through, or the distractions of the really busy world, or all of that. Like,
Mm-hmm.
so when not long after my friend passed away, I started like notebooking and scheduling and building
Mm-hmm.
all these systems for myself, just to because I felt that I that's what I needed to do, so that I could, what
Mm-hmm.
was outpouring out of my life was an expression of myself. I needed to like urgently do that before my time ran out. And I drew this
Mm-hmm.
image on the notebook. It's almost 4 years old now, because that's how long ago that was. But it's this image of time slipping through sand here on the on a
Wow.
dice, chance, all these things that are outside of my control. And this is what I was trying to do with the notebook. Keep
Mm.
climbing through that, and that's the sort of living with limited time. But what I was doing
Wow.
in that notebook
Nice.
was trying to um just make sure that with the time that I was having, I was using it maximally to outpour my values, to do the things that I'm passionate about. But it's still a massive work in progress for me, practically, and I know for a lot of people. And yeah, you mentioned to me in a previous email about Cockpit, and I looked into it. It looks really interesting. So could you tell us a bit more about the philosophy and all of that?
Yeah, absolutely. Cockpit, in the light of the conversation we had, Cockpit is really it's a system that allows you to live integrity in the action.
Mm-hmm.
And I've never described it that way, but in the light of the conversation we had, I think it's a system for integrity in action.
Okay.
And the promise of the system is that you will have freedom, power, and peace of mind. By freedom, I mean that you're free from having to remember things. You're free to do the things that you want to do. You're not enslaved by your
Right.
commitments or by demands on your time.
Self-determined, right? Self-determined.
Self-determined,
Yeah.
exactly,
Yeah.
exactly. By power, I mean the speed. I don't mean power over other people. I mean power defined as the speed at which you deliver on ideas, the speed at which you realize ideas, turn them into results. That's
Mm-hmm.
power. And by peace of mind, I mean to be poised and to be relaxed and to be in a state of flow maximally in your actions, to be totally present to what you're doing and not riddled by anxiety about what you're not doing. And I discovered that it's very difficult to do that, actually, because life has a way of getting you overwhelmed, right? There's so much things. If I asked you to list all the things that you have to do in your life, right? You have to bring up your son with values, and you have to make sure that he goes to school or kindergarten, or then you have to make sure that you have enough money, and you have to clean your teeth, and you have to do podcasts, and you have to prepare for the podcast, and you have to look for new speakers, blah blah blah, right? Life is infinitely complex and infinitely full of things to handle.
Mm-hmm.
And so Cockpit is not about time management. I think there's some interesting time management systems out there. What we designed is a system to manage your commitments, because for me, it's not about time management. I know you have this beautiful graphic with the hourglass that's running out. It's beautiful. But let's face it, time is only a resource. It's a resource like money. I mean, you could do the same thing with money running out. Money is running out also all the time. Another resource is relationships, right? So basically, what for me it's all about is am I delivering on my commitments? My commitments to my family, as a father, as a husband, as a son, as a businessman, as a writer, as a teacher, as a member of society. I have all these different roles, right? And I have lots of commitments also in the nonprofit domain. I have commitments. I'm sitting on boards of several nonprofit boards. I'm sitting on boards of companies. So there's tons of commitments, right? So for me, it's all about, can I meet all my commitments with freedom, power, and peace of mind, right?
Yes, we associate commitments with the opposite of those three things, don't we? We hear the word commitment, you think of being trapped, powerless, and stressed.
Yes, exactly. But when we look at it deeply, in my view, the only ticket to freedom is accountability.
Right.
The avoidance of accountability, the avoidance of commitment is not freedom. It's just avoidance, and then you're enslaved again, because you think that freedom is sitting on a beach somewhere with a daiquiri, or sitting on the couch and watching Netflix or whatever. But that's not freedom. That's just doing something else. And I'm not dissing it. It's fine to sit on the sofa. It's fine to sit on the beach. But for me, life. True freedom is about doing the things that you really want to do, and living the life that you want to do, and to be who you really want to be. That's freedom. The freedom to be who you are. And that entails sometimes, doing things, obviously not sitting on the beach. Unless who you are is sitting on the beach, And again, I'm not in the business of telling people what to do. So if your vision in life is to sit on a beach or to only play golf or whatever, then be my guest. That's totally fine. As long as you're not hurting anybody, it's completely okay. However, my life is not about that. My life is about meeting certain commitments. I have 7 life commitments, and I'm living life consistent with those commitments. So anyway, so the cockpit system is really kind of at the simplest level, it's an infrastructure. It consists of several elements. I'm not going to go into all of them, but basically, whenever I have a new idea, I capture it in a funnel. So I have one place where all the new ideas and all the things to do, everything, even if my wife says, could you just, before you come home, could you just buy some shredded chicken or whatever? And I put that into that thing, okay, into that funnel. And at that moment, I don't have any commitment to it yet. I then put it from the funnel regularly. I put it into my calendar, because I discovered that unless something is in my calendar, unless it lives in time with a beginning and an end, it will never happen. And, when I put it in the funnel, I'm free from having to think about it. Oh my God, I hope I don't forget. That produces anxiety, right? Anxiety is basically the fear of missing something that I promised. And so if it's in the funnel, it's out of my brain. And let's face it, the human brain is not a very good memory device, right? So I think we shouldn't use it for that. If the brain was a good memory device, it would be like a computer. And I could, when I've seen a poem once, I could say the whole poem.
You could set a notification.
Exactly. Or I could replicate the Ninth Symphony by Beethoven without flinching, right? But I can't. My memory is terrible. I'm terrible with names, for example. So I put it all into that system, and then I put it in time. And if it's not in time, it will be on a list which I call the freedom list, which is basically, I will never do this. Okay. I think I should do Tai Chi, or I think I should publish a Harvard Business Review article, but I will never do that. It's on my never list, okay? It's on my freedom list. And so I distinguish very clearly between what I will do, and that's in time, and it has a space in my calendar, or it's never. And that's why I say that it's a system for integrity and action. Because in my life, I have no maybe, I have no later, I have no I'll do my best, or I'll try. Those words don't exist in my vocabulary, because they're like a cop-out. They're like, well, I'm not really committed, and I probably won't do it, but I'm not honest about it.
Yeah,
And to be honest about it would be to put it in the freedom list and say, I will never do this. Now, once a month, I give myself the freedom to review the freedom list and say, nah, maybe I could learn the piano, right? So a few years ago, I had the piano on like learning the piano. I had that on my freedom list for many years, right? And a few years ago, I took it off the freedom list and put it in the calendar. Now I'm doing it every week or every 2 weeks at the least. I'm meeting a piano teacher on Monday night, and we play the piano together. And so I'm doing it, right? So that's integrity. It's like I'm doing what I said I would do, or I'm honest about it and put it in the never.
I think we could all relate. I mean, just hearing that one part that just speaks is very true is the incident unpleasantness that comes from adding a should to your mind, but not knowing when you're going to do it, if you're going to do it, how will other people react if I don't do it now that I've said it, when does it start being an issue that I haven't done it, yada, yada, yada. Like, the list goes on and on. It's like there's such a shift in your whole experience of life. As soon as you add something, every time you add something to that vague sort of no man's land in between space, or to are not committed to do, but to have. But either
Yes.
the other extremes feel good. I don't give a crap. I'm not going to do it, or I'm definitely doing this. I know when I'm doing it. It's sorted. Both of those feel great.
Yeah, exactly. And you know, I gave myself this routine action of revisiting the freedom list once a month, right? So I have a kind of a back door through which I can take the commitment back. But then it's going to be, like you said, it's not going to be a should. It's going to be I will or I will not. And that is also integrity, right? So the I should or the I want to, or I'm sincerely trying, or whatever, right? I would really love to. Those are all also with my clients. I basically I ban that from the vocabulary because I find it to be a killer for team performance. If your team members and your colleagues cannot count on you on your word, then what can they count on? You know, that's like the end of team performance.
Yeah.
And I know
So
maybe you want to
foundational.
talk about team performance, but for me, that's one of the key ingredients. You could call it reliability or accountability or integrity, whatever you want to call it, that people can count on my word. And that I can count on their word, right? And these words like should and ought to and all that's or later or maybe or I'll try my best. That's all ways of not being accountable, not being reliable, not having integrity.
Yeah,
And again, I'm not saying integrity as a moral distinction. Integrity as honoring your word. I'm being very precise here. It's a linguistic distinction.
Yeah, I think it's an important distinction to make because that also removes the should. It's about making decisions, and it's about making your decisions. This is going to sound a bit tangential, but I'm looping it back. I did a like a parenting. This is not, well, it might, I don't know yet, but this doesn't necessarily apply to my son. But I'm part of like a play center, which is a sort of a parenting daycare co-op kind of thing. And we did a workshop on parenting neurodiverse young people. And one thing that came up in that conversation was never say maybe later. Tell your kid no or tell them yes, because what you're just loading them. You're just putting all this weight on them. And just as I said before, with when you make a commitment to yourself, I think we also all know the feeling of being a little kid and asking, "Hey, Dad, do you want to whatever go throw the ball with me or whatever it is? Oh, maybe later." And then it's just, so when's it going to happen? When do I ask again? Yada yada, all that sort of thing. So,
Exactly.
and I think that just seeing the connection between how that works with ourselves and how that works in teams or in relationships, I'm of the view that so much of how we operate internally is a reflection of our early experiences of how we operate interpersonally, and then how we operate interpersonally as adults is, of course, how a reflection of how we interact with ourselves. And this, that that whole phenomenon, you say trust is another really important part. When you mentioned, you were talking about your triangle, your pyramid rather, and a really core tenet in relationships is trust, right? And we don't just need that to be able to achieve things, but we need that for emotional safety, for genuine relationship, for peace of mind, for all of that trust. And when I think that's just that keeping your word thing, that no in betweens, that it's happening or it's not happening, is so necessary. It's so necessary for trust, and we just don't really. It seems like, in some sense, we don't live in a culture that has that as the norm, and so much of how people fail as teams, so much as how people fail themselves, just comes from that being missing. I don't know. I'm just really buying into it. I'm really believing what you're saying about the foundational importance of it's happening or it's not happening, and if I say it, it's happening, and otherwise I don't say anything. That's important in so many ways to just being a human being.
Yeah, exactly. It's two things about this. The simplest way, when people ask me, how do I build trust? Because you're right. I mean, trust is it's so foundational to everything we do. Do we trust our political leaders because we elect them for 4 years or whatever? And can we trust them to do our will, or are they going to do some side games where they enrich themselves or whatever, or do something else? Can I trust my financial accountant? Can I trust my banker? Can I trust my wife? Can my children trust me? Etc. So it's all over the place, right? Without trust, we cannot get anything done. And the simplest way, when people ask me, how do I build that trust? What is that secret ingredient? The simplest way to build trust is to do two things: make a promise or a commitment, and then keep that commitment. That's it. And it could be very small. It could be, yes, I said I would buy the milk by 6 o'clock, and I bought it, and I'm bringing it. Okay. Barack Obama told me once a story where he was negotiating some deals with foreign leaders, and major pacts that would impact the geopolitical framework and everything. And then he comes home to his wife and Michelle, and she says, "But did you buy the milk?" That's the key. Is like, did you buy the milk? Did you do the thing you said? But I just want to correct one thing in what you said. You said keep your word, and the truth is you cannot always keep your word, right? Sometimes you make a promise that's really outlandish. You might say, I don't know, the strategic intent of this company is X, right? So we're going to fly people to Mars, or we're going to beat Canon if you're Xerox, or the other way around. If you're Canon, you're going to beat Xerox. That's the strategic intent. Or I might say, I'm gonna make 10 million in sales this year. Okay, you cannot always keep those promises. In fact, if you always keep your promises, then they're not big enough, and you're not really putting yourself at risk enough, right? So you have to be willing to make promises that are not predictions, that are outside of the feasible, that challenge your competency. I think that's also part of having a vision, and part of being a leader, right? Is to promise things that are bigger than yourself, that you cannot control, that you cannot predict. So the way I would say it, instead of keeping your word, I would say honor your word. Okay,
there's a difference.
And so when you see that you cannot keep a promise, then you simply let people know and say, you know what, I'm not going to keep that deadline. Can I do it by the end of June instead of by the end of May, or I will make a different promise, right? I will now not deliver the whole book. I will deliver one chapter, whatever, right? So whatever the promise is, basically revoke the promise that you made and then make a new one, or simply revoke and say, like you said earlier, screw it, I'm not going to do it.
Thomas, I can think of a very small maybe example of this, which is I'm late sometimes, often really. And what I've been trying to get in the habit of doing is if I think I'm going, this is what people do. This is what a lot of people do. Oh, sorry, I'm going to be a couple of minutes late. And then 5 minutes late, they say, oh, I'm just around the corner. And then 3 minutes later, I'm just pulling up, whatever. What you got to, if I'm trying to get in the habit of, if I think I'm going to be 5 minutes late, I say, hey guys, I'm going to be 10 minutes late. And then I can meet that. You know what I mean? That's maybe a little
Yes,
reflection of that point.
exactly. And by the way, I would even take out the word "I'm trying." I discovered that trying kind of involves failing, like it opens a back door, right? So
Sure.
in my view, I would make a commitment, and then yes, sometimes you fail, and you course correct, and then you do something else, or maybe you revoke the commitment. But to actually make a commitment, I will climb Mount Everest, or I will run that marathon, or whatever, and make a measurable promise, and then run the risk of failing. It's better than trying, or not quite failing because you never really promised. There are certain cultures that avoid promising. I could write an entire book just on promising. Some cultures promise the world, and then nothing happens, and it's
Is that
always
on your
mañana.
is that on your freedom list? Write a book
Yeah,
about
maybe.
promising?
I actually I should put it on the freedom list. Let me do that right now.
You're welcome.
Yeah, you can send me the bill on Saturday.
Yeah.
Write the book on promises. That's a great idea.
Yeah, I feel like I've had a look at your books. It could be a cool shift into like a more philosophy leaning kind of, or anthropology would be nice.
Yeah.
Hey, well, look, we're sort of reaching the end of our time on that note of quiet. I would like
Yeah.
to firstly say thank you so much. This has been really good. We went really deep and personal, and we went quite high and abstract. And I really appreciate talking to you. And actually, for me personally, this you can send me a bill. This has been like a reminder for me about that real point, that core. It's the core of leadership. That's the core of relationships and communication and self-determination. All of that is this strong link all the way to action and what you say and what
Mm.
you believe and what you value, and that honoring promises. So yeah, just thank you so much. And I think that's a really good message that really wraps this whole thing together. I just want to, on the topic of leadership and developing that, I know you have a course about that, so maybe you could mention a little bit about that, and just otherwise tell people who've listened to this and found it interesting, where they could go to like learn a bit more about you and your work.
Excellent. Thank you. So where people can go is obviously on Amazon. As I said, I think my 12th book is coming out in a few weeks. So there's 11 books on Amazon, and they're all, most of them are on strategy, or on leadership, on communication, on culture, like how to navigate other cultures, how to align your team on a shared strategy with all the stakeholders involved, and a strategy that comes from the action, not just from the planning. So it's basically how to integrate planning, people, and performance. I would say that's my bestseller. Actually, that's my best-selling book of all of them, called Strategy and Action. But
Right.
you're welcome to read free samples on Amazon. Amazon is really great about this, and the Kindle is great. You can read free samples and then throw it away, put it on your freedom list, and say, "I will never read this stuff." Or you could you could read it, and then hopefully apply it in your life. The other thing is, there's a course that we just brought out, which is called Lead in 30. So the promise is that you can actually lead in 30 days, and it's built over 30 days, and it's not the latest management fad or fashion. What I love about this is we took the most ancient wise people like Sun Tzu, the Chinese general who wrote The Art of War, but also Plato, and we took Socrates, and we took Thoreau and Martin Buber, and all
Surely
kinds
Marcus
of
Aurelius.
Marcus Aurelius. Thank you for mentioning him. Absolutely, Marcus Aurelius. And we took basically the wisdom from the ages and what they conveyed about leadership, and we turned it into leadership lessons with tables and handouts and things you can actually do by yourself and do with your team, do with your colleagues in order to actually apply it and put it into action. And I just read through it myself, and it's fabulous, if I could say it that way.
Good for you, man.
Obviously, I would say that I'm biased, but this is really it's a depth and at the same time a practicality that I really love. So it goes a little bit like this interview. It goes all the way from very philosophical and deep to all the way to what am I going to do it now in my office chair, right now.
Yeah, just
How
a
can
question
I
on that,
impact this
by the
meeting?
way.
Yeah.
A question about your course. Is that this was one of the questions I would have loved to get more into, but we probably do need to wrap up in a couple of minutes. But is that, at least specifically that course, is that like for people in leadership positions, or is that for anyone?
You really have a talent for asking the best questions.
Thanks, Thomas.
It's the latter. So and the background is my commitment in life, my overarching commitment in life. Why I'm still working, even though I'm financially free. I had the choice not to work anymore, right? But why I'm still working is my strategic intent is not yet fulfilled, and that is to transform the art and science of leadership in the world, right? It's a very, very ambitious objective, life purpose, if you will. Yeah, exactly. And I'm working every day to honor that, right? So, and every day I'm falling short. So, as Churchill said, success is going from failure to failure without loss of enthusiasm. So that's the basic thing. But basically, I believe that anybody, through this methodology of language, anybody has the capacity to lead, and we need everybody to lead, right? To have to seize the opportunities that humanity has to make peace, to create the future that we want to leave to our children. And so this is really for everybody. Everybody can be a leader, at the very least, of your life, of your family, of your company, of your society, and ultimately of the world, right? So that's basically how I see it. And I want everybody to take advantage of these tools, because everything that I've built and everything I've received has really been a function of these things that we were talking about. So I want to give this to the world, and I want to give it to everybody as much as possible.
Awesome. That's a fantastic vision. And I'll make sure where possible, I'm not sure you can do it on like Spotify, but I'll put a link to some of that stuff in the description when we publish this. It's been a real privilege talking to you, Thomas. Thank you so much. Nice to meet you. I hope you have a wonderful day. I'm going to go to sleep now.
Of course. But
yeah.
Can I tell you can I end with one last story?
You may, of course. I want to hear it. Yeah.
Which is basically about Isidore Rabi, who won the Nobel Prize for Physics. And he was asked, how did you get the Nobel Prize? How did you make this happen? And he said, because of my mother. And people said, what? Your mother is a physicist? No, she's not a physicist. But when I went to school as a child, I came home from school, and my mother would always ask me, not what did you learn today? She would ask me, did you ask a good question today? And that is the source of my Nobel Prize. And so I want to leave everybody with this question. We talked about doubting, and we talked about dubio ergo cogito ergo sum. I doubt, therefore I am. And I would say that asking questions, if you get nothing else from this interview, ask questions, question things. Don't accept things the way they are. Don't live from the past to the future. Live from the future to the present, and always question the status quo and always question yourself. And you will have better outcomes in your life. I deeply believe that. And I'm going to question that even myself.
That's a beautiful note. All right. Thanks again, Thomas.
Thank you so
Bye-bye.
much. Great job. Thank you, Frank.
Thanks for listening to the Mindform podcast. I'm Ryan A. Bush, founder and author of Designing the Mind and creator of Mindform. Mindform is an exclusive community and training platform for sculpting your psychological software. Members get access to a group of like-minded psychotechs, including all of our guests on this podcast, gamified growth tools, events and retreats, and a collection of transformative programs for mental health and self-mastery. You can learn more and apply to join at mindform.io/podcast. I hope to see you inside.